Welcome to the Forgotten Narrator. Alright, let's talk about one of the most obscure, elusive, and downright baffling mysteries in Warhammer 40k, the Sixth Battle of Galileon Prime. There have been countless battles in the grimdark future, each more brutal than the last, yet very few have been erased from history the way this one has. No official records, no war reports, no commemorations. It's as if the battle never happened. But we know it did. Scattered whispers, fragmented data logs, and half-burned records all point to a conflict so significant, so dangerous, that someone, or something, decided the galaxy could never know the truth. But why? Why would an entire battle, fought in the blood-soaked nightmare of the 41st millennium, be buried so deeply? What could have happened on Galileon Prime that warranted such extreme secrecy? And more importantly, who made sure we'd never find out? To answer that, we need to go back to the events leading up to the battle, the powers at play, and the dangerous truths that might still be lurking beneath the surface. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that the Imperium never hides good news. To understand why the Sixth Battle of Galileon Prime was so thoroughly wiped from the records, we first need to understand what made this planet so important in the first place. Because, make no mistake, this wasn't just another nameless war zone in the Imperium's endless struggle for survival. Galileon Prime was something else, something bigger. A world that, for reasons still debated, became the focal point of conflict after conflict, drawing in some of the most powerful factions in the galaxy. Now, if you dig deep enough into the scraps of information that remain, you'll see that Galileon Prime wasn't just some random war-torn rock. This place mattered. Strategically, economically, maybe even in ways we don't fully understand. It sat at the crossroads of several key warp routes, making it a vital supply hub for Imperial campaigns across the sector. Control of Galileon Prime meant control of the flow of troops, weapons, and resources through a massive stretch of Imperial space. That alone would have made it a prize worth fighting over, but there was something else. Whispers, legends. Old Mechanicus logs hinting that Galileon Prime held secrets buried beneath its surface, secrets that should have stayed buried. Before the Sixth Battle, Galileon Prime had already been through hell. It had seen at least 5 major conflicts, each one leaving its mark. We don't have all the details, but the previous battles paint a picture of a world in constant turmoil. First, there was an orc invasion, the kind of brutal, grinding war that left the planet scarred and its people barely holding on. Then came a chaos incursion, warbands pouring through the cracks in reality, turning entire cities into charnel houses before they were finally purged. At some point, the Tyranids arrived. Whether it was a full-scale hive fleet or just splinter organisms is unclear, but whatever happened, the records suggest it wasn't pretty. The Adeptus Mechanicus also had their moment here, launching their own reclamation efforts to retrieve something from deep within the planet, though what they found or failed to find is unknown. And then, of course, there was the war that immediately preceded the Sixth Battle. This is where things get really interesting, because the forces involved in that previous conflict should have settled the matter once and for all. The Imperium had managed to hold on to Galileon Prime, barely, but it was costly. So costly that they might have just abandoned the planet entirely if it wasn't for whatever they were protecting. The defenders had included not just Astra Militarum and the Imperial Navy, but also elements of the Adeptus Custodes, which is not something you see every day. If the Custodes were deployed, it meant there was something here that the Emperor's most elite warriors had been personally ordered to safeguard. The main players in the wars leading up to the Sixth Battle were as varied as they were deadly. The forces of chaos, always lurking on the edges, had their own interest in the planet. Some theories suggest that Galileon Prime was home to an ancient, forgotten temple, possibly a site of pre-imperial worship or even a sealed artifact too dangerous to be left unguarded. The Mechanicus, for their part, seemed obsessed with some lost technology buried beneath the surface, and there are hints that at least one Forge world had its own vested interest in keeping the planet in Imperial hands. Meanwhile, Xenos' threats never stayed away for long. Orcs had tried to claim it before, and with Tyranids active in the sector, the risk of another swarm was always looming. But even with all that history, nothing compares to the sheer silence surrounding the sixth battle. The previous wars were brutal, yes, but they weren't hidden. Their records exist, even if they're fragmented. But when we get to the sixth battle, nothing. No confirmed troop movements, no official reports, just scattered references that something happened. Something that forced every major power involved to go completely dark on what transpired. So what was it? Was it the culmination of all these previous conflicts, a final cataclysm that sealed Galileon Prime's fate? Or was it something else entirely? Something so terrifying that even the Imperium, which has never shied away from documenting its most horrifying battles, decided that this time the truth had to be buried. Whatever the case, one thing is clear: the stage had already been set. Galileon Prime wasn't just another war-torn world. It was a ticking time bomb, and when it finally exploded, someone made sure that no one would ever know why. Here's where things get weird. If you go digging for any concrete details about the sixth battle of Galileon Prime, you'll quickly realize just how little we actually know. Not just the usual classified reports or redacted names. This is a complete blackout. It's like someone went through history with a scalpel and carefully carved out every trace of what happened. And yet, despite the Imperium's best efforts, fragments of information have survived. Pieces of a puzzle that don't quite fit together, but still suggest something far bigger than just another planetary skirmish. One of the only verifiable records that hints at the battle comes from a heavily corrupted data log attributed to an Imperial Navy fleet stationed in the sector. It references an engagement of maximum priority near Galileon Prime, with orders to maintain absolute silence and avoid transmitting battle reports. That alone is suspicious. Even the most secretive of conflicts usually have at least some record of fleet movements, casualty reports, or logistical notes. But here, nothing, just that cryptic mention of a high-priority engagement followed by complete silence. Then there are the whispers from those who claim to have been there. Soldiers who survived but were never officially acknowledged, rogue traders who saw the aftermath, and even members of the Adeptus Mechanicus who hint at something unnatural. One such account, supposedly from an Imperial Guard veteran, described a battle that didn't feel real, as if the very fabric of reality was shifting mid-combat. He spoke of soldiers vanishing mid-charge, of Vox signals being scrambled by something other than enemy interference, of the sky itself splitting apart in ways that couldn't be explained. Was this just the ramblings of a broken mind? Or was it a glimpse into something much darker? And then there's the question of who was actually fighting. We know the Imperium was involved. After all, they're the ones who went to such lengths to erase the battle. But who were they fighting? One of the more common theories is that it was a chaos incursion, something so catastrophic that the Inquisition deemed it best to scrub it from history. Some believe the planet may have been the site of a failed ritual, something that nearly cracked reality wide open, forcing the Imperium to intervene in ways they never had before. If that's true, then it's not surprising that the records were buried. But others argue that this was no simple chaos incursion. There are hints, small, almost accidental references in Mechanicus archives, that something was uncovered on Galileon Prime before the battle even started. Some lost technology, some forbidden knowledge that should have remained forgotten. One of the more extreme theories suggests that this battle wasn't fought over control of the planet, but rather over whether or not whatever had been found should be destroyed. If true, that would explain the sheer scale of the secrecy. Maybe the Imperium wasn't just fighting to hold the planet, but to ensure that no one, not even their own people, ever learned what had been unleashed. There's also the possibility that Xenos forces played a role in this battle. The Eldar, especially the more secretive factions, have a habit of appearing at the worst possible moments to interfere in Imperial affairs. Some have speculated that this could have been one of those moments, that a hidden force of Eldar, perhaps even the Harlequins or a Craft World's elite, took part in the battle for reasons beyond Imperial understanding. The Drukhari, too, have been known to strike at critical moments when something valuable is at stake. If Galileon Prime truly held an artifact of immense power, it's not hard to imagine them launching a raid in the midst of the chaos, grabbing what they could before slipping back into the webway. And then there's the darkest theory of them all. The idea that the Imperium was fighting itself. Not a simple rebellion, not just another case of planetary secession, but something worse. Some believe that this battle involved factions within the Imperium itself. Different branches of power warring over a secret so damning, so dangerous, that it threatened the very stability of the Imperium. Maybe it was a schism within the Inquisition, with radicals and Puritans turning on each other. Maybe a rogue Mechanicus sect had discovered something they weren't supposed to, and when the Imperium tried to take control, it escalated into a full-blown war. If true, this would explain why even the most basic records have been erased. The Imperium doesn't just hide external threats, it buries its own sins even deeper. Whatever happened on Galileon Prime, one thing is clear. This wasn't just a battle. It was something more. Something that had to be hidden, no matter the cost. And the fact that we're still asking questions all these years later, that means they didn't quite succeed. If there's one thing we know about the Imperium, it's that they don't erase history without a damn good reason. Sure, they'll censor, redact, and classify things beyond recognition, but a total erasure? That's rare. And yet, that's exactly what happened with the 6th Battle of Galileon Prime. Someone, somewhere, made the call that no one should ever know what really happened. But who had the power to do that? And more importantly, why? The first and most obvious suspect is the Inquisition. This is exactly the kind of thing they do. If a battle revealed some kind of knowledge that threatened the Imperium, whether it was a heretical truth, forbidden technology, or some warp-fueled nightmare that should have never been uncovered, the Inquisition wouldn't just suppress it. They'd erase it. And they wouldn't stop at official records. Survivors would be purged, documents burned, even planets exterminated if necessary. If the Inquisition decided that the 6th battle was too dangerous to be remembered, then it's no surprise that it vanished. But that leads to another question. Which faction of the Inquisition was responsible? Because they're not a unified force. There are Puritans who would destroy anything that even smelled of heresy, radicals who would be willing to use forbidden knowledge rather than bury it, and shadowy groups whose motives don't align with anyone else's. Some theorists believe this could have been a case of internal conflict, one side trying to protect or exploit something found on Galileon Prime, the other ensuring that no one would ever know it existed. If that's true, then the battle may not have been about controlling the planet at all, but about who got to decide what happened to whatever was uncovered there. Then there's the Adeptus Mechanicus. If anyone had a reason to erase records, it's them. The Mechanicus is obsessed with knowledge, especially the kind of knowledge the Imperium doesn't want them to have. If they found something on Galileon Prime that violated Imperial law, AI technology, a Xenos artifact, even some lost standard template construct, the Imperium might have demanded it be destroyed. But what if the Mechanicus refused? What if a secret war broke out between different factions, some wanting to suppress this discovery, others willing to die for it? If the Mechanicus played a role in erasing the battle from history, it wasn't out of loyalty to the Imperium. It was because they wanted to ensure no one else got their hands on what they found. And what if it wasn't the Imperium at all? What if someone outside the Imperium had a reason to cover this up? The Eldar are notorious for manipulating events behind the scenes, ensuring that certain futures never come to pass. If something on Galileon Prime posed a threat, not just to the Imperium but to the galaxy itself, the Eldar might have intervened. There are some theories that suggest they had a direct hand in wiping the records, possibly using their influence, psychic trickery, or even outright destruction of key data sources to ensure no one ever spoke of the battle again. But the most terrifying possibility? The erasure wasn't done by humans at all. We assume that because records were wiped, it was an act of bureaucracy, of imperial decree. But what if it was something else? Some have suggested that the 6th battle was never meant to happen, that something about the event caused it to be removed not just from history, but from reality itself. There are references in obscure Mechanicus texts about anomalies in the noosphere, data corruption so profound that it seems like entire events were rewritten. Could this battle have been one of those? Did something occur that was so catastrophic that reality itself tried to correct it? No matter who did it, whether it was the Inquisition, the Mechanicus, the Eldar, or something even worse, the fact remains that someone decided this battle could never be known. And that alone tells us it was more than just another war. It was something monumental, something so dangerous that even the Imperium, with all its brutal history, looked at it and said, "This must never be remembered." If there's one thing that could explain why the Sixth Battle of Galileon Prime was completely erased from history, it's the possibility that a weapon was used that should have never existed. The Imperium has fought wars for 10,000 years, and no matter how brutal, no matter how devastating, battles are almost never erased. That only happens when something too dangerous to be known comes into play. And what's more dangerous than a weapon so powerful, so catastrophic, that even the Imperium, which regularly exterminates entire planets without a second thought, decided that it had to be hidden forever? The most common theory among those who have dug into this mystery is that the battle saw the use of a superweapon, something beyond even the most destructive exterminators' protocols. Not just virus bombs, not just cyclonic torpedoes, something that either broke reality itself or changed the course of history in a way that couldn't be allowed to stand. Some suspect the Mechanicus, always hunting for lost technology, may have found something ancient beneath the surface of Galileon Prime. Maybe it was a pre-Imperial weapon, or worse, something from the dark age of technology, when mankind's mastery over science went far beyond anything the Imperium allows today. There are whispers, fragments of corrupted data logs that hint at a weapon that didn't just destroy, but erased. Entire regiments disappearing without a trace, not just killed, but as if they had never existed at all. Vox transmissions from the battlefield cutting off mid-sentence, not because of interference, but because the people speaking them were simply gone. If this is true, then we aren't just talking about a bomb or a super laser. We're talking about something that tampered with time, with space, with the fundamental laws of existence. That would explain why no record of the battle remains, because something was used that erased more than just people. It erased memory, history, entire realities. Some believe that what was found on Galileon Prime wasn't human in origin at all. There are hints, scattered across different sources, that Necron technology may have been involved. The Necrons wield weapons that go beyond destruction. They have devices that can unmake matter, that can rewrite existence itself. If a Necron artifact was unearthed here, and someone activated it, then the battle may have been over before it even began. The Imperium, realizing what had happened, may have done the only thing they could. They buried the truth, and ensured no one ever went looking for whatever had been unleashed. But Necron tech isn't the only suspect. Some have speculated that a lost piece of humanity's own forbidden past was the cause of all this. The Men of Iron, the artificial intelligences that nearly destroyed humanity during the Age of Strife, left behind ruins, factories, and horrors that should never have been reactivated. If the Mechanicus uncovered a war machine from that era, something so powerful that even an Imperial warfleet couldn't stop it, then they may have been forced to make the hardest choice of all, to erase every trace of the battle, so that no one would ever try to recover what had been found. There's also a darker theory, one that suggests the weapon used wasn't mechanical, but psychic. The Imperium has always feared psychic warfare, and for good reason. The warp is unpredictable, uncontrollable, and utterly merciless. What if, during the battle, someone, whether a sanctioned psyker, a rogue faction of the Inquisition, or even the enemy itself, unleashed a psychic event so catastrophic that it broke the mind of reality itself? A warp detonation on a scale never seen before, something that not only consumed the battlefield, but shattered the ability to even remember it. That would explain why the records don't just lack details, but seem to have been scrubbed from existence. And then there's the possibility that the weapon wasn't meant to be a weapon at all. Some of the most dangerous technologies in Warhammer 40k weren't designed for war. They were experiments, scientific advancements that spiraled out of control. What if the battle started not because of a typical invasion, but because someone accidentally activated something they were never supposed to touch? Maybe an experiment beneath Galileon Prime went wrong. Maybe a device that was meant to be studied was instead unleashed. Maybe the sixth battle wasn't a war at all. It was a desperate attempt to contain something that could have destroyed far more than just one planet. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. If the Imperium had a weapon this powerful, they would have used it again, unless they couldn't. The fact that we haven't seen anything like this before or since suggests one of two things. Either whatever was used was immediately destroyed, or it was something that could never be controlled again. Maybe the Imperium realized that this wasn't a weapon they could harness, but a force that would spiral out of control the moment it was unleashed. And in a universe where survival is everything, they made the ultimate decision to ensure no one ever tried to use it again. So the question remains, did the sixth battle of Galileon Prime end in victory, or was it a warning? If there's one thing that the Imperium fears more than its own failings, it's the unknown. The things that lurk in the void, the horrors that can't be reasoned with, the entities that defy logic itself. The complete erasure of the sixth battle of Galileon Prime suggests that whatever happened wasn't just a military disaster. It was something that had to be buried, not just physically, but in the minds of those who survived. And when you look at the patterns, the strange disappearances, and the sheer refusal of the Imperium to acknowledge the battle at all, one terrifying possibility starts to emerge. This wasn't a war against another army. This was a war against something that shouldn't exist. The first and most obvious suspect is chaos. The warp seeps into every corner of the galaxy, and wherever there's war, chaos isn't far behind. If the sixth battle involved a chaos incursion, it wouldn't be surprising that the Imperium tried to cover it up. But this wouldn't have been just any ordinary chaos assault. The Imperium has fought against the legions of the Dark Gods for millennia, and they don't erase those battles from history. They document them, use them as cautionary tales, reminders of why the Imperium must remain strong. If this battle was wiped clean, it means chaos didn't just invade, it did something worse. Some theories suggest that Galileon Prime might have been ground zero for a ritual gone horribly wrong. Maybe a chaos cult, hidden deep beneath the planet's surface, had spent centuries preparing something. Something that, when finally unleashed, forced the Imperium to take extreme measures. What if a greater demon wasn't just summoned, but fully manifested in a way that had never been seen before? What if the very fabric of the planet itself became corrupted, to the point where even speaking of it risked spreading its taint? If this was the case, then the battle may not have ended in a victory at all. It may have ended in the total annihilation of everything involved, with the Imperium barely managing to contain the damage before it spread. Then there's the theory that this wasn't just about chaos, but something even more unnatural. There are few things that scare the Imperium as much as the unknowable horrors that lurk in the darkness of the warp. Sometimes things slip through. Things that aren't demons, things that even the Chaos Gods don't control. There are rumors of entities beyond the standard warp-born nightmares, things that rewrite reality just by existing. What if something like that was discovered on Galileon Prime? Something that should have never been awakened? But chaos isn't the only possibility. The galaxy is full of threats that operate in ways the Imperium doesn't understand. Some fans have speculated that this battle might have involved a Xenos force so dangerous, so uncontrollable, that the Imperium decided it was better to pretend the encounter never happened. And when you start looking at the different alien species that could have been involved, things get even more unsettling. Tyranids are a prime suspect. Not just because of their sheer destructive potential, but because of how they evolve. The Tyranids learn from every battle, adapting, growing stronger, ensuring that the next time they encounter a threat, they can counter it. What if Galileon Prime was where the Imperium encountered something new, a bioform unlike anything seen before? If the Tyranids created a strain that was so dangerous that even mentioning it risked spreading knowledge of its existence, the Imperium's only option might have been to purge all evidence and hope it was truly destroyed. There's even a theory that suggests that the battle may have involved an entire hive ship becoming self-aware, a Tyranid intelligence that operated beyond the simple will of the hive mind. If that were true, it wouldn't just be an abomination. It would be a nightmare scenario for the entire galaxy. Then there's the Eldar. The Eldar are infamous for their manipulation, for their willingness to let millions die just to ensure their own survival. If they were involved, it could mean that Galileon Prime was connected to something far older than the Imperium. Maybe it was a lost webway gate or a hidden artifact that could threaten their entire race. If the Eldar were forced into direct conflict over something like that, it would have been devastating, not just for them, but for anyone caught in the crossfire. And if they won, if they managed to convince the Imperium to bury the battle, to pretend it never happened, then it would be one of the greatest manipulations they've ever pulled off. And then there's the theory that this wasn't the first time Galileon Prime had been fought over. What if this wasn't just about a battle, but about something that had happened on that world long before? Maybe the sixth battle wasn't about winning. Maybe it was about ensuring that whatever had been buried there before could never be uncovered again. Some fans believe that Galileon Prime might have been a toon world, not of the Necrons, but of something even older. A race lost to history, something that even the Eldar feared. If that's true, then the sixth battle may have been a last, desperate attempt to prevent an extinction-level event. At the end of the day, we may never know what truly happened on Galileon Prime. But the fact that it was erased, the fact that no one is allowed to even speak of it, tells us that something unnatural took place. Whether it was chaos, Tyranids, Eldar, or something we haven't even begun to comprehend, one thing is clear. This battle was more than just war. It was a warning. And the fact that the Imperium buried it so completely, that means whatever happened, it could happen again. If there's one thing the Imperium hates to admit, it's that some of its greatest threats don't come from Xenos, chaos, or the horrors of the warp. They come from within. For all its fanatical devotion, its iron-fisted rule, and its ruthless suppression of heresy, the Imperium is not united. It never has been. Its institutions are built on power struggles, hidden agendas, and constant backstabbing. Wars have been fought not just against external enemies, but between factions that are all supposed to be on the same side. So what if the sixth battle of Galileon Prime wasn't just another war? What if it was a betrayal? The theory that the battle was erased to cover up internal conflict isn't just some wild idea. It actually makes a lot of sense. Think about it. When the Imperium fights chaos, orcs, or Tyranids, they don't try to erase the battle from history. Even the worst disasters, Cadia, Armageddon, the fall of Medusa, are still remembered because they serve as lessons, warnings, or propaganda. But if Galileon Prime was the site of an Imperial civil war, that would be exactly the kind of thing they would want to erase. The Imperium cannot afford to let its people know that their so-called unbreakable empire is constantly at war with itself. One of the most plausible theories is that this battle was part of an Inquisitorial purge gone horribly wrong. The Inquisition, for all its supposed authority, is not a unified force. It's split into countless factions. Radicals who believe in using Xenos and warp-tainted weapons, Puritans who would rather burn entire planets than risk contamination, and shadowy cabals with agendas so secretive that even other Inquisitors don't know what they're planning. What if Galileon Prime was where one of these internal feuds erupted into open war? Some believe that a radical faction of the Inquisition, possibly even one dealing with forbidden technology or psychic experimentation, had established a secret base on Galileon Prime. Maybe they were conducting research on something the rest of the Imperium would consider heresy. A weapon, a Xenos artifact, or even warp-based manipulation. If a Puritan warband of the Inquisition discovered this, they wouldn't have tried to negotiate. They would have declared exterminatus. And if the radical faction had their own military assets, rogue regiments, Mechanicus allies, even Astartes under their command, then this could have escalated into a full-blown war, with both sides claiming to fight for the Imperium's survival. Then there's the possibility that the betrayal came from the Astra Militarum, or the Imperial Navy itself. The Imperium's military might is vast, but it's not immune to insubordination. Planetary governors hoard power, rogue traders operate on the fringes of legality, and entire regiments of the Guard have turned traitor throughout history. Could it be that a high-ranking Imperial commander went rogue on Galileon Prime? Maybe they discovered something they weren't supposed to and refused to follow orders. Maybe they saw a chance to seize power for themselves. Whatever the case, if a full-scale rebellion broke out, the Imperium would have crushed it, but not before thousands, maybe even millions, of Imperial troops were forced to fight against their own brothers. There's also a darker possibility, one that suggests Space Marines were involved. Now, this is rare, but it's happened before. The Badab War saw entire chapters of Astartes turn on each other, and the Imperium still tries to keep that part of history under wraps. What if something similar happened on Galileon Prime? What if a chapter of the Adeptus Astartes, whether out of desperation, ideological conflict, or even sheer survival, turned against the Imperium? If that were the case, the battle wouldn't just have been brutal. It would have been an unthinkable disgrace. The Imperium would never allow the common people to know that its greatest warriors had turned on each other once again. They wouldn't just censor the battle, they would erase it completely. And then there's the Adeptus Mechanicus. If anyone in the Imperium has their own agenda, it's them. The Mechanicus has its own laws, its own secrets, and its own silent wars that most of the Imperium never even hears about. If Galileon Prime was home to some ancient technology, something that different Forge worlds or tech priests disagreed on how to handle, it could have led to a catastrophic conflict. Imagine two branches of the Mechanicus, both believing they have the right to claim or destroy whatever was found. If things escalated beyond control, if the war was so devastating that the Imperium had to step in and wipe the slate clean, it would make perfect sense why no one talks about it today. The real question, though, is this. If the Sixth Battle of Galileon Prime was a betrayal, who actually won? Did the Imperium manage to suppress the rebels, kill the rogue commanders, and destroy whatever caused the conflict? Or did the losing side escape, scattered, but still alive, still carrying the secrets they fought to protect? What if there are still survivors out there, remnants of whatever faction turned on the Imperium, hiding in the shadows, waiting for another chance? One thing is for sure. If this battle really was Imperium versus Imperium, that would explain why the records were destroyed. The Imperium survives on the belief that it is eternal, unbreakable, unified under the God Emperor's rule. If the truth was ever known, that its greatest enemy might be itself, it wouldn't just be a scandal. It would be a crack in the very foundation of everything the Imperium stands for. And that's something they would burn entire worlds to keep hidden. If there's one group in the Imperium that specializes in making things disappear, it's the Inquisition. They are the ultimate enforcers of Imperial secrecy, the ones who decide what is too dangerous for humanity to know. If the Sixth Battle of Galileon Prime was erased from history, the Inquisition wasn't just involved. They were leading the charge. And the terrifying part? We'll probably never know just how much they wiped out. The Inquisition doesn't do things halfway. When they want something buried, they don't just delete files or classify records. They eliminate everything: documents, data archives, entire fleets, people. There's a saying among those who know too much: if the Inquisition wants you gone, you never existed in the first place. And that's exactly what seems to have happened here. No after-action reports, no survivor testimonies, no relics left behind. It's as if the battle was scrubbed out of reality itself. So the real question is, why? Why would the Inquisition go to such extremes to cover up this battle? Normally, they only get involved when something truly dangerous is at stake. Something so heretical, so reality-breaking, that even knowledge of it is a threat. And the more you think about it, the more that lines up with what little we do know about Galileon Prime. Maybe this wasn't just about winning the battle. Maybe it was about containing something that could never be allowed to spread. Some theorists believe that the Inquisition's involvement started before the battle even began. What if the Sixth Battle of Galileon Prime wasn't a war in the traditional sense, but an inquisitorial purge on a massive scale? If there was something on that planet that needed to be erased, the Inquisition wouldn't just send a few operatives, they would send an army. They would mobilize the Astra Militarum, call in Astartes, even enlist the Adeptus Mechanicus if necessary. And once the battle was over, Once whatever had been unleashed was destroyed, the Inquisition would have turned its attention to the witnesses. That's another terrifying possibility. Maybe the sixth battle didn't just end in victory. Maybe it ended in a massacre, not of the enemy, but of Imperial forces who had seen too much. We know this has happened before. There have been instances where entire planets were wiped out, not because they were lost to chaos or Xenos, but because they simply knew something they weren't supposed to. The Imperium's philosophy is simple. Dead men tell no tales. If whatever happened on Galileon Prime was so horrific that even speaking of it was a danger, then the soldiers who fought there might never have left the planet alive. But what makes this theory even more compelling is the scale of the cover-up. The Inquisition erases things all the time, but they don't usually wipe entire wars from history. That kind of operation requires coordination on a galactic level. Every fleet commander, every bureaucrat, every scribe who even glanced at a report about the battle would have had to be silenced. Entire data archives would have been purged, administrative records rewritten, even personal logs confiscated or destroyed. We're talking about a system-wide effort to remove any trace of the battle from existence. And that leads to an even darker possibility. What if they didn't succeed? What if, despite their best efforts, fragments of the truth still survived? If you dig deep enough, you do find strange inconsistencies in the records. Gaps in fleet deployments, missing regiments that have no official explanation for their disappearance, even Mechanicus logs that mention Galileon Prime before suddenly cutting off. It's almost as if the Inquisition tried to erase everything, but some scraps of data refused to stay buried. Which raises another question. Is the Inquisition still watching? If they went to such extreme lengths to hide this battle, it means they believed the truth could never be allowed to come out. That means, even now, centuries later, they might still be monitoring any attempt to uncover what really happened. Maybe that's why the little information we do have is so fragmented. Maybe those who have come too close to the truth simply disappeared. One thing is certain, this wasn't just another battle. If the Inquisition was involved, then Galileon Prime wasn't just a war zone. It was a crime scene, a place where something happened that could never be allowed to surface. And if history has taught us anything, it's that the Inquisition doesn't erase things out of fear. They erase things because they know what would happen if the truth ever got out. The most unsettling thing about the aftermath of the Sixth Battle of Galileon Prime isn't just the lack of records, it's the silence. Wars always leave scars. Planets don't just bounce back after major conflicts, and the Imperium doesn't just move on without at least some trace of what happened. But Galileon Prime? It's as if the planet itself just ceased to matter. For a world that had been fought over so many times before, the fact that no one seems to care about it anymore is strange. Before the battle, Galileon Prime was a key strategic point, a planet that multiple factions had bled for over and over again. But after the Sixth Battle, the Imperium barely acknowledges its existence. There are no more military campaigns centered around it, no more strategic importance in official records, no signs of major Imperial presence, no mention of continued defenses, nothing. It's like the Imperium just decided to forget about it entirely. Which begs the question, what happened to the planet itself? Did the battle leave it uninhabitable? Was it outright destroyed? Some theorists believe that the battle may have ended in exterminatus, that whatever was happening on the planet became so dire that the Imperium had no choice but to purge it completely. But if that were the case, we'd at least expect some record of its destruction. Even when the Imperium obliterates worlds, they usually don't erase them from history altogether. That suggests something even more disturbing. Maybe Galileon Prime wasn't just physically destroyed, but something worse. Maybe it was rendered unrecognizable, or completely cut off from the Imperium altogether. There are some truly wild theories that suggest the planet was either removed from reality or fell into some kind of warp anomaly. The idea isn't completely far-fetched. Entire star systems have disappeared into the warp before. There have been cases of planets becoming trapped in time loops, lost in dimensional rifts, or even rewritten by unknown forces. If the Sixth Battle of Galileon Prime involved something beyond conventional warfare, something that tampered with time, space, or the warp itself, then it's possible the Imperium didn't just erase the records. They simply had no choice because the planet itself was no longer there to document. And what about the survivors? If anyone made it out of that battle, where did they go? Here's where things get even more suspicious. There are no known records of surviving regiments, no veteran accounts, no honors or commendations given for the battle. In almost every other war, even the most disastrous ones, there are always survivors. Even the doomed defenders of Cadia had survivors. But here, nothing. Either every single person who fought in the battle was wiped out, or more chillingly, they were deliberately silenced. One of the more unsettling theories is that the survivors weren't just killed, but hunted down afterward. If the battle involved something the Imperium needed to keep secret, then anyone who saw it would have been a threat. Maybe that's why there are no scattered accounts, no former soldiers speaking about it in hushed tones. The Inquisition could have ensured that no one who set foot on Galileon Prime ever spoke again. Or, even worse, maybe the survivors were affected by whatever happened there, twisted in ways that made them dangerous. If some kind of reality-breaking weapon or warp corruption was involved, then the Imperium wouldn't have been able to risk letting them live. The strangest part is what happened to the wider sector. Galileon Prime was once a hub of military activity, a major supply route for campaigns beyond its system. After the battle, that entire region seems to have lost relevance. Imperial presence in the area faded. Fleet movements shifted away. It's almost as if the Imperium doesn't want anyone getting too close. This isn't normal. When the Imperium wins a war, they reinforce their hold. When they lose, they regroup and prepare for another fight. But here, they just left. It's as if whatever happened on Galileon Prime didn't just end a battle, it changed something fundamental about the entire sector. And that's what makes this whole thing so unnerving. Wars leave consequences. We should be able to see some trace of what happened, even if it's just in the scars left behind. But with Galileon Prime, the biggest consequence seems to be that the Imperium just stopped talking about it entirely. Whatever happened there, it wasn't just a disaster. It was something that forced the Imperium to pretend the planet never even mattered in the first place. And if the Imperium is afraid of even acknowledging it, then maybe, just maybe, we should be too. At this point, with so little official information available, fan theories are all we have. And let me tell you, some of them are absolutely insane. But that's what makes this whole mystery so compelling. When the Imperium erases something this completely, it doesn't just create a gap in history, it creates a vacuum. And in that vacuum, the community has built its own explanations. Some of these theories are well-reasoned, others are pure tinfoil hat insanity, but all of them ask the same question. What the hell happened on Galileon Prime? One of the most popular theories is that the battle involved a failed Imperial experiment, something that went so catastrophically wrong that it had to be wiped from history. Some fans speculate that the Mechanicus, or maybe even the Inquisition, was testing a new type of weapon. Not just another exterminatus tool, but something that broke the fundamental rules of war itself. Maybe it was an attempt at warp-based weaponry, something that could turn the tides against chaos. But instead, it ripped a hole in reality so deep that the Imperium had to cover it up. Others believe it was a lost relic from the Dark Age of technology, an ancient superweapon that should have stayed buried. If that's the case, then maybe the battle wasn't just about winning. Maybe it was a desperate attempt to undo a mistake before it consumed more than just the planet. Another widely debated theory is that the battle involved a faction war within the Imperium. Some fans think this wasn't an external invasion at all, but a civil war between Imperial forces. Maybe a rogue Imperial commander refused to follow orders and declared independence. Maybe the Inquisition turned on a faction of the Mechanicus, leading to all-out war over some forbidden discovery. There's even speculation that two Space Marine chapters went to war against each other, which would explain why the Imperium covered it up. Because the last time Astartes fought Astartes on a large scale, it led to the Bedab War, a conflict the Imperium still tries to downplay. If Galileon Prime was the site of another chapter-on-chapter war, especially one involving secret alliances or heretical experimentation, That would be more than enough reason for the Inquisition to purge every trace of it. Then there's the Xenos theory, which suggests that Galileon Prime wasn't wiped out because of what was found, but who was involved. The Eldar have been whispered about in this mystery for a while, particularly because they're known for manipulating events behind the scenes. Some fans believe that this battle was orchestrated by the Eldar, that they led the Imperium and another faction into conflict for their own mysterious reasons. Maybe Galileon Prime held an ancient webway gate that no one was supposed to find. Maybe there was something so dangerous to the Eldar race that they had to force the Imperium into an unwinnable war just to ensure it was destroyed. But if the Eldar theory is compelling, then the Tyrannid theory is downright terrifying. Some believe the battle involved a Tyrannid bioform unlike anything we've ever seen. Not just another swarm, but something completely new, something that evolved past the Imperium's ability to fight it. There are hints, lost fleet reports, strange gaps in the records of Tyrannid hive movements that suggest something changed in this sector after the battle. What if the Imperium encountered a new strain of Tyrannid, something so unstoppable that the only way to ensure it never spread was to erase all knowledge of it? What if the Tyrannids won? If that's the case, then maybe the Imperium didn't erase the records because they were ashamed or hiding a secret weapon. Maybe they did it because they lost and didn't want anyone to know what was coming next. And then there's the absolute wildest theory, the idea that Galileon Prime never existed in the first place. This one sounds ridiculous at first, but hear me out. Some fans believe that the records of the Sixth Battle weren't erased because of a cover-up, but because the battle itself was a temporal anomaly. That something happened, maybe a warp-related event, maybe a Necron technology activation, that rewrote reality in such a way that the Imperium itself was forced to erase all records of what transpired. Imagine a battle where, halfway through, the entire planet ceased to exist in the timeline as it was previously known. The Imperium, realizing that something had changed, might have wiped out the records not just to hide the event, but because they no longer made sense. If time itself was altered, then maybe the Sixth Battle of Galileon Prime is something that technically never even happened in the first place. So, which theory is the most likely? Honestly, all of them sound insane, but that's exactly the point. Whatever happened was so extreme, so impossible to reconcile with the Imperium's usual way of handling things, that it had to be erased. A normal planetary war, no matter how brutal, wouldn't need this level of secrecy. The fact that the Imperium went to such lengths to pretend this battle never happened means something unique, something catastrophic, something completely outside the norm took place. And maybe that's why people can't stop theorizing about it. The more the Imperium tries to hide something, the more people start digging. Maybe one day we'll find out the truth. But if history has taught us anything, it's that when the Imperium erases something this completely, it's because knowing the truth is worse than ignorance. It's almost poetic how the biggest consequence of the Sixth Battle of Galileon Prime is silence. Wars leave scars, on planets, on people, on history itself. But this one, it was different. It wasn't just a battle that the Imperium lost or even one they couldn't afford to acknowledge. It was a battle that they made sure never happened. And yet, the galaxy always remembers. Maybe not in official records, maybe not in Imperial archives, but in the strange gaps, the unanswered questions, and the whispers that refuse to die. Galileon Prime, once a strategic point of immense importance, is now a dead name. No more conflicts, no more fleet movements, no supply chains, no recorded population, no reference to Imperial control. Before the battle, it was a world that had been fought over countless times. After? It's as if the Imperium decided that even acknowledging its existence was too dangerous. No known rebuilding efforts, no attempts to repopulate. It's as if, rather than risk another war, the Imperium just walked away. That raises an unsettling question. Is Galileon Prime even still there? There are multiple conflicting reports on the planet's fate, and none of them are comforting. Some theorists believe the world was simply abandoned, that after whatever happened in the Sixth Battle, it was left to rot, cut off from the rest of the Imperium. If that's the case, the planet might now be a derelict wasteland, a forgotten relic of something too horrifying to ever revisit. Others, however, believe that the planet was outright destroyed, whether through exterminatus or something far worse. But if that's true, where's the record? Even planets that have been wiped out completely still have some mention of their destruction. Galileon Prime, on the other hand, has been scrubbed so thoroughly that even its absence feels deliberate. Then there's the darker theory, one that suggests Galileon Prime was not destroyed, but changed. Some believe the battle unleashed something so unnatural that the planet itself became unrecognizable. Maybe it fell into the warp, transformed into a nightmarish demon world that no one dares to name. Maybe it became something else entirely. Something that still exists, but in a state so alien, so wrong, that it is no longer part of the galaxy as we know it. If that were true, then the Imperium's silence wouldn't just be a cover-up. It would be an act of self-preservation. The ripple effects didn't stop at the planet itself. The entire sector surrounding Galileon Prime seems to have suffered in the aftermath. Trade routes shifted, military deployments were rerouted, and Imperial influence in the region faded. Before the battle, the system had been a key strategic location, a vital point in the Imperium's war machine. Afterward, it became a void, not just physically, but in terms of Imperial attention. No reinforcements, no expansion, just absence. And that is not normal. What about the factions involved? That's another mystery. Normally, when a war ends, there are consequences. Victors consolidate power, losers regroup or disappear. But here? Nothing. If the Imperium won, why didn't they reinforce the sector? If they lost, who took over? And if it was something worse, something that no one survived, then what does that say about the scale of the battle? The most unnerving possibility is that there were no winners at all. That what happened on Galileon Prime wasn't a war, but a catastrophe. One so absolute that all sides involved were wiped from existence, leaving nothing behind but questions. And yet, even with all these unanswered questions, the Imperium still acts like nothing happened. That, more than anything, is what makes this whole mystery so terrifying. The Imperium doesn't just erase things because they're inconvenient. They erase things when the truth is more dangerous than ignorance. If Galileon Prime was simply destroyed, they'd have turned it into a cautionary tale. If it was a defeat, they'd have spun it into propaganda, a martyrdom story for the ages. But instead, they chose the one option they almost never take. They pretended it never existed at all. That silence speaks louder than any battle report ever could. It tells us that something happened there that no one is supposed to know about. And if history has taught us anything, it's that secrets like this don't stay buried forever. The Imperium may have wiped Galileon Prime from its records, but the galaxy has a way of remembering, even if it takes centuries for the truth to surface. Maybe one day someone will uncover what really happened. Maybe a rogue trader will stumble upon whatever remains of the planet. Maybe a hidden data cache will reveal the truth. Or maybe, just maybe, something that was meant to stay buried will wake up. And when that day comes, the Imperium's greatest mistake won't be what they erased, but what they couldn't.